Today, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of a Colorado man who argued his conviction in a stalking case violated his First Amendment rights. News 5's Ashley Portillo in studio breaking down the ruling. And Ashley, you spoke to experts about this, and it all really comes down to whether or not the threats were considered true.
Well, Allison, it does, and it does stem from Facebook messages that the defendant, his name is Billy Raymond Counterman, began sending to a Colorado musician back in 2014. The court went on to say all of his messages even put her in a state of fear to the point she stopped walking alone and also canceled some of her performances. These are a few of the hundreds of messages Billy Raymond Counterman sent to a Colorado musician. Prosecutors say she tried to block him, but he kept creating new accounts and sending messages.
But it is very threatening, very frightening. It terrorized this woman to where she was changing things she was doing in her life.
Former 4th Judicial District Attorney Dan May weighed in, saying harassment can be hard to prove.
The harassment area is one that's very difficult to define what is criminal and what crosses over into the First Amendment rights.
Counterman was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for stalking. But were his messages true threats or freedom of speech?
It's clear that if I come out and I say, I'm going to kill you, that crosses the line into the criminal, and we can charge that. But today in our modern social media, the way people can stalk people through media, hound them, and like in this case where he keeps changing Facebook, she keeps trying to block him, it becomes very frightening.
Counterman argued his messages were not true threats and he could not be criminally charged. Justices with the U.S. Supreme Court say prosecutors have to show the person not only made threatening statements, but that the person knew the statements were threatening. I spoke to personal injury lawyer Stephen Longo, who explains it like this.
What they did was basically take an objective standard regarding what true threats are when we're talking about harassment or threats. And that objective standard is, would a reasonable person think that these are true threats? Are these threatening messages or actions? And lower that to a subjective standard, meaning that the defendant needs to have at least some belief or understanding, some subjective understanding that they are threatening messages or behavior.
In a statement provided to News 5, Counterman's lawyer before the U.S. Supreme Court, John Elwood, said, "We're gratified. Free speech is too important to imprison people for statements that are at most negligent." And Daryl Glenn, the chief legal officer of TESA, said, "Our primary worries are whether this will negatively impact law enforcement's ability to address these threats or whether clients will no longer feel they will be properly addressed in the legal system." So in a statement, Colorado's Attorney General called the ruling, quote, "a loophole for delusional and devious stalkers." By the way, the case now returns to lower courts for further proceedings on whether that conviction should be thrown out. Diane.